Welcome back. I know it's been a while, but rest assured, I am still here and will still be making videos. But for now, my upload frequency will be a lot slower. During this time, your likes and subscriptions will go a really long way, so if you have the time, please leave a like, a comment, and make sure that you're subscribed. And now that that's out the way, let's dive in. April 8th, 2025. A Redditor by the name MME Genevieve came onto the RBI sub concerned about a person prowling around in their neighborhood. How to catch a serial prowler. There's a prowler in my neighborhood, USA, who has been bothering myself and my neighbors. He primarily uses our abuted backyards, the tree lines, and the benefit of darkness to go from house to house. He disables security lights and cameras by reaching up and moving them. He switches off my security light. He wears a hoodie tracksuit with the hood up and a baseball cap underneath, so the images I did get were useless. He's also very familiar with the landscape, seems to know where all the cameras and lights are, and is good at staying out of range. So far, he's just being a nuisance. He keeps going into my neighbor's yard to tease their dog, was messing with his kid's bedroom window, crossed into my yard, tilted my camera down, then came onto my porch and moved my security light and switched off the motion detection before continuing to another neighbor's yard. So far, he has not broken in anywhere that we know of, but seems to have a route that he travels. My neighbor caught him in his yard previously, yelled at him repeatedly to leave, but the prowler ran when my neighbor was getting shoes and a weapon. The prowler came back to the same yard a few nights later. Another neighbor reported he'd moved her cameras before she caught him looking into her windows. He ran when she yelled and began calling the police. The police have not been able to help or catch him, but 4 other neighbors on our block have had their cameras/lights moved. 2 of them had had their window screens removed, so it's not looking good. This is just a hunch, but I believe it's the youngest child of a former neighbor, because the main house that he keeps returning to is his former residence. The kid had an issue with trespassing on neighbors' property when he lived here. He felt entitled to jump fences and cross through yards like he owned them, and would get really mouthy when caught and told to stop. Does anyone have a good idea for how to legally catch/stop him? Whoever this individual is, like the OP said, must have lived in or is currently living in the neighborhood they're prowling in. Not only does this person know the landscape, they also know the locations of seemingly the entire neighborhood's cameras and outside lights, meaning they've likely spent a lot of time there. I wouldn't want anybody prowling around my home, and I definitely don't want them going through my personal things where any personal or sensitive information could be. You can't always predict what will happen, but you can take steps to protect yourself in case something does. And in the case of my personal information, I use Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Have you ever gotten one of those scam texts that act like somebody who knows you? Or what about the ones that claim you owe the government money, but come from a randomly generated email address? Chances are that your personal information has been bought and sold online by companies called data brokers, who buy and sell your information without your consent to scammers, spammers, and potentially even stalkers. Take a second and consider doing an internet search on your name. You might discover that information you wouldn't give out to just anybody is posted online for anyone to find. Things like your full name, your phone number, your email addresses, and even your home address. Legally, these data brokers have to remove your information upon request. But the problem is, they make it extremely complicated and confusing on purpose, in the hopes that you either give up or don't figure it out, so that they can continue profiting off of your data. And that's where Aura comes in. They go through all the hurdles and make sure that your data gets removed, saving you the headache and time. And Aura does a lot more than just protect your data. They are all-in-one digital security. You get a secure VPN, antivirus, and password manager, real-time credit and fraud alerts for credit and banking accounts. They comb through the dark web and send you an alert if your information is found on there, monitoring your information 24/7 to keep it secure, and even have round-the-clock US-based support in case anything goes wrong. But if that's not enough, or it even includes a $5 million identity theft insurance protection. It's really easy to set up. And best of all, you get everything for one affordable price. You might even already have one or two of these security tools already, but not having Aura is like locking your front and back door, but leaving the windows wide open. Don't just take it from me. You can try it out for yourself using my link, aura.com/goldcoffin, for a 14-day free trial. During that entire time, you can use Aura to check if your information has been posted online and begin actively removing it. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable, and you shouldn't either. So one more time, that's aura.com/coldcoffin for a risk-free 14-day free trial. Thanks again to Aura, and now, back to the video. The top comment on this post came from a user by the name CarrieM730. Safely and legally, keep calling police. Maybe adjust to the lights/cameras to make it harder to hide from all them. Most importantly, you and your neighbors need to realize this is not just a nuisance. He's messing with kids' windows, taking out screens. Nah, this is a seriously potentially dangerous situation. I would be adding cameras and putting out a trail cam in an unexpected place. Example, your regular security camera is at the corner of the house facing the back deck. The trail cam goes on a post of the deck so it catches images when he's reaching up to mess with the regular camera. I would also probably be asking for extra patrols on my street, and I would be watching for any patterns in his appearances and try to be a step ahead. This commenter has a good point. I would also suggest adding more cameras, and even potentially organizing a neighborhood watch to help catch the prowler in the act. In my opinion, the OP seems a bit too calm about the situation. Like the commenter stated, taking out screens and messing with windows seems like something very serious. Add in disconnected cameras and lights, and you're potentially cooking up something very bad. If this person is a stalker who's obsessed with one of the multiple residents in the neighborhood, then things could escalate. The OP would respond back with this to the comment. Thank you for your response. You're right, it is more than a nuisance. I'm very concerned and afraid because I think he is becoming bolder. I will take your recommendations and share them with the neighbors. The police have been asked to increase patrols and have, but are not taking this as seriously as they should. Several of the neighbors, including me, are older women, so when they don't immediately catch the prowler, they imply that we are imagining things and have outright told the new neighbors that we are crying wolf. I don't know how they explain the guy seeing him in his yard or the window screens. If the police aren't taking it as seriously like the OP said, then that's all the more reason to organize a neighborhood watch. But 1 week later, the OP would come back with an update on the situation. I took the advice of Redditors and spoke directly with the police chief. We had a very productive conversation. I'd been under the impression that the patrol officers didn't believe myself and another neighbor concerning the prowler, but was assured by the chief that he did believe us and was investigating. He stated that one of the neighbors who had had repeated issues with the prowler was waiting to contact patrol. The delay was making it more difficult to catch the prowler in the act. I expressed that I also hesitated to call the police because I'd felt dismissed and disbelieved on previous incidents. The chief stated that he wanted us to call immediately, every time, no matter the hour. I relayed this to my neighbors. A few nights ago, the prowler returned to the neighborhood. He entered the house of my neighbor through the back door. The neighbors were sitting in the kitchen table. They yelled and immediately called the police. The prowler backed out the door and ran. The police encountered him walking towards a bar a few blocks away. But since the neighbor didn't catch him on camera, he was not caught on her property, he didn't take anything or assault the neighbor, and state laws, they were unable to arrest him. They did ID him though. We were told that the officers told him they know he's the prowler and warned him to stay out of the neighborhood and out of people's yards and homes. I'm very disappointed that he was not arrested, but the police know who he is. Hopefully, he will heed the warnings now that he's been identified. Originally, this story ended here, but at the time of this recording, there has been one more update. Update. The prowler did enter a neighbor's home. He was wearing a hoodie, cap, and bandana over his face. The homeowner couldn't identify him definitely, because the room was dark and only his eyes and part of his forehead were uncovered. The police caught him sitting at a nearby bar. He was wearing what the homeowner described and had the bandana in his pocket. Because the homeowner couldn't positively identify him and he was not caught in the act, he was not arrested. The police detained him for quite a while and told him that they knew it was him. He has been told not to enter the neighborhood at all, and he's being watched. The police told the neighbor the name of the suspect, and she told me. Things have been quiet overall since. This situation is exactly what I feared, but thankfully, it appears as though nobody was hurt and the police have identified the person. But it is scary that despite already being caught inside of one of the neighbors' homes once, the prowler went back, this time wearing a cap and bandana over his face. I can't get over the fact that he wasn't arrested, but I guess his efforts to conceal his identity paid off. One good thing to come out of this, however, is that the police have given him a thorough warning and know that if there are any more incidents, that he will be the first one they go to. Let's just hope that this is enough of a deterrent and that the prowler does not come back to the neighborhood anymore, for the OP and their neighbors' sake. This next post is a bit of a rabbit hole, so buckle up. Reddit user Titan1846 came onto the RBI subreddit on October 17, 2024, with their post titled, "Chinese dancing girl on TikTok looked terrified." I occasionally scroll through TikTok live at work. I work 48-hour shifts, so every so often, we might go hours without a call, and it kills some time. I saw a group of Chinese girls doing a dancing competition sort of thing. I watched it for a minute, and it just felt weird, so I decided I'd look at it later. I came back about 6 or 7 hours later, and they were still going. I ended up just messaging back and forth with one of the girls while they were live, just kind of BSing in small talk. I know the technique is to probably message people to get money. The host, a guy who sounded Indian, started talking about immunity and needing X gifts or sunglasses. It's a TikTok gift apparently. The girl I was messaging back and forth, who looked chill the whole time I watched, got up and needed X for whatever immunity means. She kept looking over her left side, talking to someone with the mic away from her mouth, and started to look proceedingly terrified the more the time counted down. She didn't win whatever immunity is, and started to look down, getting teary, and I mean looked absolutely terrified. I was a cop and help in internet crimes against children and investigations, so I'm pretty good at picking up real scared versus the BS scared, and it looked like real scared. We just kept small talking and she talked about needing to work, this dancing job, 6 hours a day just about every day. I never asked, "Are you okay?" or "What the hell?" because I figured the account, which was her personal account, was still probably monitored by a talent agency if that's what it is. So I was just asking honest questions because I was just curious. I asked an honest question. "So what happens if you don't get the immunity?" And she said it was sort of like getting a bad review at work. I had to go, so I said bye, nice chatting with you, and she said the same. I looked into it a little more online later, and saw in general some articles about human trafficking / forced work. I'm not going to spend all my money on live streams to save her, and I'm not trying to be the knight type guy. Working in investigations and law enforcement, you develop a certain sense when something just feels off. I'm fully aware this could just be a scam / act to try and get donations, and I'm not falling into that. From what I saw, it just seemed like all the girls got more and more tense when the immunity was brought up. The other 2 girls I watched not win walked off. Also, each immediately got more nervous looking, head down, looking over to the left side, taking the mic away from their mouth so you couldn't hear when they interacted with that left side. Like I've said, I've gotten pretty good at the real scared and anxious look versus the BS look. Of course, I could be wrong, and it was through a screen. Just wondering if anyone knows anything about what this sort of thing is. There are a ton of other channels like it. The things they all have in common were 4 to 5 Chinese girls dancing, the host sounding Indian, and similar type challenges, competitions, and games. Unfortunately, the OP did not provide any links or TikTok accounts to back their story up, but I did look into this myself, and I found multiple accounts and live streams that seemed to be exactly what the OP described. I've blocked out the women's faces for their privacy, but some things I found interesting where then on each live stream, the dancers all use the same filter. The women are also wearing a number somewhere on their bodies, and while the background in each stream varies in color scheme and name, the same template seems to be used for each one. And just like the OP said, there is a male individual off-screen instructing/encouraging the women to keep dancing, and also asking the audience for donations. They don't have a lot of viewers on these streams, so I don't think they're generating a lot of money off of a single live. But if you zoom out and look at the whole picture, then we can see a whole industry of this type of content. You've likely heard of foreign bot farms, where companies artificially inflate social media numbers, such as followers, likes, comments, live stream viewers. Well, this seems like straight up money farming, using TikTok Live as a vessel. And the OP wasn't the only person to come across this. Other Redditors would also comment about stumbling upon these sort of streams. User what_o would say this: I came across one the other day. Like 6 girls in little nooks dressed in fantasy type wear. The camera would pan, and a girl would be picked. She'd step forward, dance a terrible 10-second dance, and go back to her nook. Each girl had their own routine/song, and this goes on for hours. It seriously seems so trafficky. I personally can't say for certain if this is or isn't some form of human trafficking, but it is weird. However, user MilkChugger69 would reply to what_o's comment with information that might make this whole situation a lot darker. This is a common occurrence for North Korean female refugees that enter China with a trafficking group. Usually they would be sold off for marriage, but it's become a recent phenomenon to force these girls into camming and taking all the money in exchange for not revealing her presence in the country. China automatically deports DPRK refugees. MilkChugger even included a link to a BBC article supporting his claim. The article is from 2019 and details the story of 2 women that about 3 years apart defected from North Korea and made their way into China with the help of human traffickers. But unfortunately, the people who brought them into the country became their captors. The women were confined to an apartment and forced to do adult webcam shows. For a bit of background, people escaping North Korea can't go directly south into South Korea because the border between the 2 nations are intensely monitored and filled with landmines. So, as a result, instead of going directly south, defectors have to take the long way through China and make it down to either Thailand, Vietnam, or Cambodia, then fly into South Korea. Unfortunately, this is not only very complicated, but also risky, because China is the longest part of the journey, and the Chinese government immediately deports North Korean defectors back to North Korea, which, if what we've heard about the DPRK is true, comes with severe consequences. We can now see how easily it would be for human traffickers to exploit these people. Thankfully, after 5 and 8 years of being held captive, the 2 women from the article managed to escape by making a makeshift rope and climbing out the apartment window, where they ran on foot until they met a pastor who took them in and later managed to get them into South Korea. But they are only 2 of thousands and perhaps hundreds of thousands of people being forced into this kind of scheme. It's even so popular that, trigger warning, in China, it's often called the Korean pig trade. I wouldn't be surprised if schemes like this evolved from webcam shows to TikTok live streams. But is this what we and the OP are witnessing? Well, the OP did come back with an update to the post with a bit of extra information. Update. I talked to a buddy of mine who's in cybercrimes. He basically said, yeah, it's a thing. Some are trafficked, some are doing it willingly, some are doing it because they have no better option. He asked for the channel name and said he'll just take a quick look. He was telling me trafficking and live streaming is an emerging thing. Instead of having to put a girl on the street or something and risk her getting killed, kidnapped, or escaping, and losing that investment, they use seemingly innocent things like TikTok to online chat rooms, and not just risk their investment. They can keep that victim completely controlled so they can't try and run as easily or try to get help. And if they use an online chat room, they can get 100+ eyes on a girl at a time. If she streams there for 6 to 8 hours a day, that's a ton of money. I was just curious about it, and he gave me the number of a friend he has in the FBI office near me. He said to give him a call, and he'll have way more insight on it than he does. I guess if you're a human trafficker, that would make sense. But a commenter by the name Frisky Luke would claim that they had actually worked for a company that ran a similar live stream operation and gave their insight on the matter. I lived in China for some time and did work for a small company which would recruit people, mostly foreigners, to live stream on American TikTok. The company would provide props, Wi-Fi, a strong VPN, because American TikTok, among many other common social media platforms, is illegal and blocked in China, and provide encouragement and ideas for a successful live stream. Then, they would make a percentage of what was earned through gifts during the live stream. This type of business is not uncommon in China, from my understanding, and some businesses do very well with it. This type of live stream, where they have a lineup of young, typically Chinese girls sit ready to dance when chosen while having a man off screen hyping the audience up, and playing looping beat club music is very common, and popular on China's version of TikTok. Many of these companies have been trying to make a presence with it on American TikTok, which is much more lucrative than on the Chinese version. The company I used to work for did this as well. I knew many of the girls who would do this type of dance live stream. From my understanding, I'm back in the States now and don't spend any time on TikTok anymore. This is not as popular on American TikTok, but something that seems to get more interaction with it might be to add subtle weirdness to the live streams, giving it more intrigue to the American audience by making it more of a creepy mystery. Another factor that might be at play here is that the American version of TikTok is actively trying to ban as many Chinese citizens and Chinese companies from live streaming on TikTok in an effort to keep the live streams American/Western based and keep in line with the Chinese law. Again, using American TikTok in China is illegal. There are many things that people live streaming from China have to be careful not to say, not because they don't want the audience to hear, but because they don't want to be flagged as a Chinese streamer and then be banned. These bannings happened a lot while I was working for the company, so I know this is a serious thing for them. Is something bad happening with these live streams? I don't know. Making good money in China is difficult for many citizens of China, and if a young girl can do well working for this kind of company and doing this sort of live stream, it is not only relatively easy work compared to alternatives, it is also a much bigger paycheck than most jobs available over there. Does this mean the girls on these live streams are not being trafficked? I have no clue. I wish I could say I know it's never trafficking, but I do know for certain that there are companies in China orchestrating this exact thing and profiting off of it, sometimes to the girls' benefit. This is my understanding of what is happening. It's hard to say if this is some form of trafficking or Chinese social media companies, but I think it's safe to say that there are likely legal and illegal operations of this kind happening, and probably not just in China. The part where the commenter mentions the weirdness does fit well with what I saw on some of the streams. If this is done for the purpose of making this some kind of mystery, then they're doing a good job. This section of the video would be proof of that. But our OP would return 2 months after their original post with one more update. About 2 months ago, I posted about girls dancing on TikTok seemingly scared and one reaching out to me. I thought I would update that. I spoke with a few friends who worked in investigations, etc., and they said unfortunately, not too much they can do. However, that doesn't stop a private party such as a private investigator to look into it. Here's what we found out so far that isn't going too deep into it that it would screw the investigation. Some girls do voluntarily do it. Some do it because it's better than the alternative of factory work, etc. Some were promised a glory job with super high pay, great benefits, and so on, and become basically trapped, and sadly, some are forced. Money donated to them seems to typically be split between the girls, host, and company that hires them. How the money is distributed goes: company, host, highest rated girl that day, and down, with some making very little. From what we understand, there is definitely psychological abuse going on, some physical, and possibly sexual. There's a sort of list between the girls. The top girls usually beat up on the bottom performing girls because it affects their bottom line too. They seem to work and have reported to us they work 16 hours a day, with breaks in there. As for living situations, it varies. Some use the money to get an apartment, while others are provided housing, which is essentially a cot, shared bathroom, etc. There is quite a bit more we've gotten into with them, but a lot of the subjects we've asked about, the girls are very, very avoidant of. One we asked was, "Can you leave when you want?" And the answer we got was, "Oh, of course, yes," in a nervous tone, ending the conversation. At the end of the day, sadly, we can't really do anything since it never appears to be on US soil, and none of them have given locations. The investigation is more of a curiosity and understanding of it. Waviest Metal would comment this. Sounds very similar to the internet scam centers set up in the Golden Triangle between China and Myanmar. Not sure if you've ever gotten an indication of location, but the dormitory situation rings similar bells. Which reminds me a lot about the Reddit post from a Redditor whose relative was trafficked to Myanmar and forced to work at a call center where they were housed in a work dorm and not allowed to leave. But a user by the name ono_ks would respond to the comment with this. It's quite common for a company to provide multi-people dorms in China, just part of the culture. Looking into it, it seems to check out. And as it turns out, in 2012, there was a 2,000-person brawl at a dormitory of a Chinese Apple factory. Apple, as in the tech company Apple. There are some images of what these kind of dormitories typically look like. And our OP even replied to Waviest Metal, stating that they managed to figure out where some of these facilities were located. We have some indication of where a few are. They have what I'd call offices and buildings, for lack of a better term. We've confirmed one building in China. We don't know how many offices are officially there. We've found solid proof to put 2 of these offices in India. One we've put in Rajasthan, and one smaller one in Gujarat. We're sure there are more of these complexes and buildings in China. It's harder to pinpoint those locations since we're all in the US, but we've been finding ways around that slowly. With this newfound information, we get a better idea of just how massive this operation is, but like the OP mentioned, there's not really much we can do about it. Some Redditors pointed out how much this situation resembles the Netflix documentary, Dancing for the Devil, and having seen it myself, I do somewhat agree. The film is about a group of TikTokers working under a religious management agency that exploited them financially and emotionally, all while forcing them to make online content. It's even been described as a TikTok cult. I won't get into it any further, and this is definitely not an ad, but it is worth a watch. The reason I mention it is because it shows that this type of thing doesn't just happen overseas. It's happening right here on our own soil. Because in this day and age, views are also money, and where there's money, there are those willing to exploit others to get as much money as they can. And this is where our road ends. As of now, the OP hasn't posted any updates, and these kind of streams are still pretty easy to find online. So unfortunately, we're left with a frustrating feeling of having uncovered something big, but not being able to do anything about it. August 25th, 2024, Reddit user LegittyBitty came onto the RBI subreddit with a sad and disturbing post. But before I begin, I'm going to leave out some of the names in this post, out of respect, and in an effort to add a layer of privacy for the OP and their family. And now, back to the post. My little sister's grave was robbed on her birthday. Hello. Not sure how to explain this situation, just going to summarize as best I can. My little sister passed away in 2019 from bowel cancer at the age of 27, days before lockdown in Australia came into place. She left behind her 1-year-old son, partner, my mom, myself, and 2 other sisters to grieve. The lockdowns meant a lot of planning and replanning her funeral. In the end, we had organized a funeral that was to be scrapped to adhere to new COVID regulations once a week for about 5 weeks. We had to live stream the funeral to people that weren't allowed to come for COVID's sake. It was very weird having people in your face with cameras while grieving. But I digress. My mom, sisters, and I had agreed on a headstone for my little sister, a giant rose quartz chunk. Her middle name and my grandmother's name were/are both Rose. We all made a trip to find the perfect rose quartz stone south of Melbourne at an outdoor crystal supplier. We all scrambled over a hill of rose quartz boulders in the harsh sun to find the perfect piece. One particular piece spoke to us all. It had the shape that just seemed right, and each of us had accidentally cut ourselves on its sharp edges as we handled it. We joked that it was almost like a spiritual ritual. My mom lugged it back to Canberra, working with 2 different masons to get this stone ready for install. It took years, but the rose quartz was finally installed on April 29th, 2024. Less than a month later, on my sister's birthday, her son and his father went to visit her site, only to find it destroyed and the rose quartz gone. My mom had been at the site less than 24 hours earlier to clean it up for my sister's son's arrival, and first visit to her site since the stone had been placed. There were other thefts in the area which are outlined in the article below. Now, my family and I were not wealthy people. I'd consider us a band of artsy women. We don't hold value in objects or things, but it was strange to realize just how much a physical object can be so irreplaceable and important to the grieving process, which is why I'm reaching out. We've had plenty of people offering to pay for a replacement, etc., which certainly restored some faith in humanity for me, but my family and I just want the stone back. The most info I have is from the news articles as I live out of state. Thanks for letting me post. This has been pretty frustrating and traumatic. If anyone can sleuth their way through this info or knows anyone with a giant piece of rose quartz in Canberra, I'd appreciate any information. My sister and I were the littlest in my family. We only shared a room growing up and were very close. I think she would be big emo mad if I didn't try my best to fix this situation. People can be insanely cruel, but they can also be helpful. Immediately after posting, commenters began giving the OP advice. That's beyond messed up. I'm so sorry. It is a beautiful stone, and I hope you're able to somehow get it back. There's a few different subreddits for rocks, etc. I wonder if posting in there might help too. I would also probably suggest making sure local rock stores know about the situation, as I can't picture a pawn shop buying a chunk of rose quartz, but that's who you'd alert if it was a less unique valuable item that had been stolen this way. Maybe offering to cover whatever the cost is to buy it from the thieves, but also trying to get whatever identifying info they are able to reasonably get is something some people might consider. Others might not like the idea of letting the thieves profit, but sometimes getting the item back is much more important than that. Great idea to check in with rock stores and pawn shops. Hadn't thought about that. I had thought it's sitting in some drug dealer's home, but of course they'll likely sell it on, even if that's the case. It was a 30-kilogram stone, really unusual shape, and I doubt they'll break it to make it unrecognizable, as it's much more valuable as a solid piece. Judging by the info I've gotten from different articles, how my family found out most of the info, it seems like they went on a bit of a spree, stealing from other sites and trying to steal a car from the parking lot. So it likely wasn't just some random act of vandalism, but happened out of financial desperation. Difficult to handle the opposing feeling of utter disappointment in humans and sympathy towards the clearly desperate and smooth-brained people. I never got to see the stone finally in place, though I carried it around a lot. Thanks for the ideas. The OP also provided an article that included images of her sister's grave before and after her rose quartz was stolen. A lot of commenters suggested getting in contact with the rock/crystal community in the OP's area, as they were a tight-knit group and would likely be willing to help the OP, or at the very least keep an eye out for their sister's rose quartz crystal. And thankfully, not too long after they first came onto the sub, the OP came back with an update. Thought I'd give a little update on some recent developments with the police investigation, an arrest, further losses, and a fundraiser. Police arrest and development. I'm so grateful to my sister and the police for working hard to make this possible. Although the authorities were unable to recover the stone, the investigation bore some fruit. A suspect was arrested after all items, but not the stone, were found in their possession. You can find the article about the arrests here. The article has as much knowledge as we do. The article states that in October of 2024, Australian police obtained a search warrant for the home of a 39-year-old man, where police found multiple items that they believed were stolen from grave sites where the OP's sister was laid to rest. Some of the items included bronze-looking Buddha statues, a bronze-looking hand, a gun, and ammunition. The article, like the OP, states that every stolen item had been recovered, except for the rose quartz stone. On one hand, it appears as though the individual was identified and charged for their crimes, but the OP Sisters stone is still missing, and now it seems that it may never come back. The OP continued their update. Further loss. Since the site was destroyed, we've suffered the loss of my mother's sister and her mother. They were both laid to rest in the same family plot as my sister. The theft, along with my aunt's passing being so close to my grandma, has left us with a lot of pieces of a memorial site that we would love to make whole. Fundraiser. After these latest losses, I've talked my mom around into having a fundraiser. Thank you for those that suggested this. I don't think I can post a fundraiser link here, but on GoFundMe, it's called Replace Sadia's Stolen Headstone and Restore Family Memorial. Thank you to everyone for your kindness, understanding, and warmth. There has been so much darkness for my family recently, and it can be difficult to see through that without the help of others. I wouldn't have ever expected that help to come from strangers. Just thank you. At the time of this recording, there have been no more updates. I did mention the OP Sisters name once. That's because it's a part of the GoFundMe title, and I wanted to make sure that anybody who was willing to donate would have an easier time finding it. There will also be a link to the GoFundMe in the description. We don't know when or even if they might get the original stone back, but at least this way we can help them out during their time of need. That's all for this video. Leave a like if you made it this far, and as always, thanks for watching.